recording. There we go. All right. So at this point, we've got our car pretty far along, right? We're even starting to kind of see how we could build up thickness for stuff. And what I want to do is I want to do a little bit more of that today. Maybe start to explore how to build the windows up. We might kind of save that for next week. Our car does not require that much texturing, right? So we are spending more of the term modeling it because it is a complex model. And the car body itself we can do with just some basic shaders. We'll do some texturing here and there on some parts of it. We'll do some definitely some texturing for the tires and the rims. But this will be a little more heavy modeling-wise and materials-wise. So at this point, what I do want to do is I want to start to kind of create a little bit more of kind of the thickened structure for these parts right here. Now, I really feel like this is going to be much more of like a two-seater car with not much of a back seat. So what I'm going to do is kind of like I sort of teased you guys with a little bit the other day, kind of extrude this and kind of fill this part in. So once again, this is going to be a lot of the same stuff we've done before. So remember 4 for object mode, right? Because that'll allow you in the viewport to click on the object you want to work with, which is this. And then of course we go 2 for edge mode. And if we want, we could of course tweak some of these shapes, right? 1 for vertex, 2 for edges, right? Remember, you can always swap between those even while you're still in tweak mode, right? So remember, tweak is something that will stay on even when you switch to your different selection types, which is actually really, really cool. Technically, you could turn on all 3 of these if you select them in viewport, and then you'll have kind of a super mode where you can grab a vertex or an edge or a face. But I found that actually, because it's so easy to swap between those with great quick keys and the tweak tool stays on, that for me, I don't really turn that on, right? I just kind of work, and then if I want to switch to edges, go to edges, because it doesn't drop your tweak tool. And remember, this is just a kind of way we can kind of just, explore the shape a little bit more, bring up some of these vertices or edges just to get that curvature more we want to. Remember, Q toggles through those, right? So Q turns it on, right? W is your move tool, Q is your selection tool, but it toggles you through these different selection types. Remember, you can also hold down left mouse button, and it brings them up here, and you can see I've actually got some quick keys set to those because I like it that way, right? All right, so I'm going to go 2 for edge mode because we do want to kind of build the thickness here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this edge here, right? Left click. And then, of course, I can shift left click because remember, shift adds to selections. And there's a couple in here I want to select still. So remember, in the select menu, you have select linked. Now, we've seen this plenty of times. I keep reinforcing this in all the videos because these are great tools. You can use them a lot. I've got quick keys set up for these, but I want to make sure you guys know where they're at. Remember, you can assign your own quick keys for these. Select linked is the one where it selects whatever polygons are connected, right? That actually does have its own default quick key, right bracket. I just think that's a little far over on the keyboard for something that I use all the time, particularly since I'm using industry compatible. So I switched it to spacebar, which I think is great because I don't do much animation, and that really, by default, kind of makes your animation playthrough, and I'm on an animator, so I'm like, I do not need spacebar for that, so I'm going to use it for something cooler. But I also have a quick key for shortest path, right? And I use that a good amount, so I also have that kind of where my left hand is. You notice how I kind of try to put some of these things over by like the left hand, because that's, as much as you can have that all kind of right where it should be, right next to each other with good muscle memory, you're in good shape. It's one of the reasons why I prefer industry compatible to the default Blender. I just feel like the default Blender stuff's a bit on the goofy and not necessarily always most user-friendly side for some of its quick keys. They're not good for, they're almost too literal. Whereas you need to think much more about kind of muscle memory and ergonomics. So I love industry compatible in Blender. So shortest path, I've assigned a quick key to that. And that, remember, just selects your shortest path. Now, just to kind of point this out, it will actually, like if I was to say kind of grab here and here, this will probably work fine, but you will find sometimes it will try to find the legitimate shortest path. So sometimes it's going to actually kind of do something besides this, right? So keep that in mind, is that you might find it not necessarily finding the shortest path through there, or it will find a shorter path. So just keep that in mind a little bit for that stuff. All right, so I'm just going to use a quickie for it. And of course we want to extrude, right? Now remember, that's Control E. Of course, if you're in the modeling layout, You have a lot of your big tools over here, right? There's extrude there, there's inset, bevel, loop cut. You even have your knife tool there. Your shrink and flatten, which I've assigned a quick key to, is great. That's kind of like your move along normal direction. And of course, right click will bring up many other options that aren't there. Edge slides there. We haven't used this yet that much, but it's quite useful. Rotate edges clockwise. That's your spin tool. We'll see that later on. Not this project, though, necessarily. But I'm just going to do Control E because that's the quick key for it, right? And that's Maya's quick key for Extrude, too. So if and when you ever guys learn Maya, because of what we're using with Industry Panel and Blender, you'll honestly probably still prefer Blender, I do, but you'll like Maya a lot, and you'll already have you'll already be able to hit the ground running, right? Because a lot of good default quick keys and even major workflow things in Blender with Industry Compatible on are Mayas. Many aspects are Moto as well, which is great. It's kind of it takes all the cool parts of both those applications and has a lot of its own cool parts. So Control E, middle mouse button, right? Because remember, you can grab the yellow arrow, and sometimes that's cool, right? That is basically your move along average normal direction. There's going to be times when you like to do that, right? Because it's going to kind of find like the middle ground between multiple polygons that are over a curved surface. But oftentimes you're not going to want that. I end up spending a lot of time using just the view move, right? Because you remember there is this kind of white circle on the outside. And you see how kind of when you highlight them, they highlight? Middle mouse button, though, automatically does. See how you can kind of even see down here, right? There's extrude region and move, which is left mouse button. There is middle mouse button, extrude region and move, right? So middle mouse button, because you'll see if you just do left, it just doesn't do it, right? But middle mouse button will actually extrude and move it. It will move it based on the view, right? In this case, I'm going to move it down a little bit. So I'm going to hit W for move down. There we go. And then, of course, I'm going to extrude again. Control E, middle mouse button. Now, at this point, if I want to, remember, you can hit E for rotate. Now, remember, you do have all your handles available, right? So you can always rotate along the X, the Y, and the Z, right? Your red, green, and blue. But oftentimes, particularly with this car, with a lot of curvature, you don't really need precision. You could use view, right? Remember, middle mouse button will do view rotate just like with the move tool, it'll do view move, right? Middle mouse button is basically your ability to grab on the center, which for rotate on the view move, view rotate. For the scale tool, remember it's uniform scale, so scales all three at the same time. So just keep that stuff in mind, right? Control E for extrude, middle mouse button. Now remember, clipping is on here, so if I keep moving these in, you see how they start to weld together? That's what your clipping does for your mirror modifier. So remember, you want to have a mirror modifier so that you have proper symmetry, so that when you work on this side, it works on the other side. But having clipping on makes it so that when you get these close enough to the center of the model, right, in this case 0 for the x-axis, they merge together, and they stay merged together, right? You can't move them off. So clipping, very, very cool. Remember, double left click for select edge loops, middle mouse button, so I can easily just go in here and keep adjusting those shapes. Now you can see in this case right here, we might need to start to think about how we're going to bridge these together. And it might even be one of those cases where maybe I'll select those edges. Control E for extrusion, middle mouse button, move those down. All right. And then, of course, I come back to my tweak tool, select these. Remember, should be same number to same number when you bridge, right? If you bridge different number to different number, it will create triangles, right? So if I go in here and I hold down Shift to deselect that one, so I've got 4 to 2, and I do bridge edge loops, see how it creates triangles? So remember, you want 4 to same number to same number. It doesn't have to be 4 to 4. It could be 2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4, 5 to 5. But you do want same number to same number if you want it to bridge quads. Otherwise, it's going to bridge triangles. So, of course, right-click, because that brings up the edge context menu, bridge edge loops. And there's that connection. Now, of course, I could bring some of these edges down. You will see that there is still a hole here. And I could easily just double-click to select that edge loop, right? It's selecting the whole border edge loop. Right click, and remember in the edge context menu right below bridge edge loops is new face from edges. Fill is tricky. If you do fill, it fills it, but it fills with triangles, right? So believe it or not, the one right above fill, because that's where, if you go to Maya, you'll be confused. In Maya, fill, because it has its own tool called fill, would actually do what new face from edges does. It fills it, but it makes it just it makes it one giant polygon. In this case, it should make quads because there's only 4 vertices on that border edge loop. But even though fill is technically filling, it fills with triangles, whereas new face from edges fills it with an actual non-triangle. If this was a border edge loop that had 6 vertices on it, it'd make a 6-sided polygon, make an n-gon. So there we go. And of course, I can do some tweaks, right? Because my tweak tool's on. I can move some edges around or some vertices just to kind of get that shape a little bit more. But you'll notice that we have kind of that back end now. But you see how it's kind of got a lot more thickness for us? We can even start to kind of build some thickness for these doors. Because remember, we're trying to kind of create the illusion of thickness. On our door, we actually did thicken and then rebuilt. And that's fine too. But to kind of thicken the whole car and then rebuild might be a little tricky. So it tends to be easier just to kind of come in here and create the illusion of thickness, right? So 2 for edge mode again. Double left clicks. And remember, Blender's quite good at stopping where you hit, say, like a vertex with only 2 edges coming out of it, right? So when you go to select these, it'll just kind of select that one. And of course, I can hit Control-E for extrusion. Now remember, I could do extrude along normal direction, right? And that'll actually work pretty well for us, but it kind of does it at a slight angle, because see how the average normal direction is a little bit kind of weird? So sometimes you just middle mouse click and not move it anywhere, and then just switch to W for move, and then move it exactly along the x-axis, right? Bring that in just a little bit, so it keeps that kind of edge sharper there. And then, of course, I can do Control-E for extrude again. Click middle mouse, W for move tool. So remember, you can middle mouse click without dragging. So if you just middle mouse click and don't hold down middle mouse button, right, what it'll end up doing is doing the extrusion, right, but not actually moving it anywhere. And then you can just switch to your regular move tool to do it. Now you notice our move tool is set to global, so it'll align this manipulator exactly with the world axis, which is what we want right now. But you see how we can slowly kind of start to build in this shape. Now, one of the things we could, of course, do is maybe straighten this shape out a little bit. Now, you'll notice that I have some options over here, right? So if I close this down, see this little V right here? It's kind of V on its left side. If I click on it, that opens these up, right? Now, these aren't on by default. Remember, this is one of those things I've kind of pointed out a couple times. Edit preferences, add-ons, right? And I'll talk about the add-ons again, like we're not going to use speed retop on this project, but we'll see it on our last project. But we will do text tools for this one again. But there are many add-ons that come with Blender, right? Some you have to kind of download, but things like UV layout is one that you'll turn on. Modifier tools is this one right here. Auto mirror is actually in there, and that's actually kind of neat because that kind of cuts your model in half and mirrors it over automatically for you. So if you want that, you can use it. But you also see I've checked on edit mesh tools and loop tools, which are these right here actually, right? So if you click on that V and you don't see these in the edit menu, because there's view, there's tool, right? There's edit. That's where those are actually at, right? Edit, preferences, add-ons. And you just check these on. These come with Blender, right? Blender actually comes with a lot in here that you can turn on or off if you want to, right? Magic UV I have on as well. Text tools is one I had to install. I'll eventually show you guys where speed retop was at as well. That's another free one. We don't have to worry about text tools right now. We're UV and wrap will do that because they're UV ones. But for right now, all you'd have to do is find and turn the ones on, right? So pretty much all the ones I mentioned, like modifier tools, edit mesh, loop tools, those actually come with Blender. You just have to go to add-ons, look for them, click on them to turn them on. There is a search up here, so you can always kind of click on it to search for the add-on that you want. And if you've downloaded your own free ones or even paid ones, like I have bPainter for texturing, you can install them right here. It's actually quite painless to set up add-ons. So, with that said, right, you'll kind of see this little kind of a V on its side pointing to the left right here. You click on that, opens this up. And it gives you these little tabs. I can click on edit. And you'll see that there are face tools in here. So if you ever want to cut faces, or utility tools has like your flip normals, right? But you also see that there is in the loop tools area, circle for circularize, and flatten. So if I click on the flatten button, yeah, the pass is up there. Yep. So if I click on flatten, in this case, you'll notice it doesn't do that much. Sometimes the flatten tool won't work that spectacularly, right? You can open up. There are some options here, right? You can lock to some of the coordinates if you want to. But it is actually pretty neat. It can do some cool flattening if you need it to. In this case, it looks like it was flattening or trying to flatten to that direction. You see how it kind of flattened it this direction. So you could always kind of open it up and then kind of try to maybe pick, say, the y-axis and see what that does for us. And you see how it actually did a pretty good... well, I didn't really want to do it on the y-axis. Let's try x. There we go. Flatten. And you see there, it's still kind of... Even when you pick an axis or lock an axis, it's not always perfect. You can try kind of view or normal for it. But I just want to make sure you guys know there's a flatten tool. Sometimes, though, it's easier just to hit R for scale. And you just scale towards the 0. Right? If you scale towards the center, that will actually do quite a good job of flattening its own. Right? Because if you scale towards the center of your scale tool, you're getting closer and closer to 0 scale. Right? You go to Maya. Maya stock does not have a flatten tool. Right? So flatten's cool, and I use it often. Well, not often, but occasionally. But sometimes it is just easier just to scale it, to flatten it the way you want to, right? Because sometimes going in and turning on all the different options to get it to flatten exactly the way you want to is slower than just scaling it towards 0, right? But sometimes it works perfect right when you do it. You don't have to go to the options. But I want to remind you guys that you have these cool tools in here. Some of you guys remember Circle from earlier projects. Circle's super cool, right? But you can see how we can slowly start to kind of build up. I'll switch to my tweak tool to kind of bring this one down. But we can slowly start to kind of build up kind of that look of thickness for our vehicle, right? So we can even do it here. Maybe I'll select this edge, and then X, because that's my quick key for shortest path. And then, of course, I can hit Control-E, middle mouse button to click, W for move this in just a little bit. Not a lot, because I want to keep that shape pretty sharp by keeping this edge loop not far from this edge loop. Control-E for extrude, middle mouse button, and then click, and then it's W for move this in a little bit. Like I said, we could try flatten again if we want to. And you see, once again, it's really kind of trying to flatten along a certain axis. So I'm just going to hit R for scale. And you see how as you scale that towards the 0, that does a pretty good job of flattening in its own right. And that's good to know anyways, because you're always going to have a flatten tool available. And like I said, I've found flatten tools are good and useful, but they don't always work perfectly anyways. So it's great to know how to do it with just your scale, right? R for scale. And all you have to do is scale towards the center of your manipulator, because that'll create 0 scale, which is flat, right? That's no scale, flatten stuff up. And you can see how we can slowly kind of start to create that look. I'm going to hide my door really quick, eyeball there. And then, of course, I can go to edge mode here, and I can select these two edges right here. Actually, that one we'll leave alone, because it'll probably cause a slight issue. So that edge to that edge, bridge edge loops. Then I could double left click on that edge loop, right click, new face from edges, And there we go. Of course, I could always tweak the shape a little bit. If we want to, we could always try to rebuild that as a non-triangle. But you can see we're slowly kind of starting to create the look of thickened structure without actually thickening, right? And of course, these could be brought in a little bit just to kind of line them up a little bit better. 3 for face mode, there we go. And of course, edge loops can be added to tighten the shapes up also, but I think this will probably be a good place to stop. Although, let's actually do it really quick. Alt-C for loop cut. And if I just left-click drag an edge loop in here and slide it towards the corner, you see how it sharpens that shape up? Because remember, it's making this small corner here smaller, right? There's now 3 total edge loops that are defined in this corner. And that means that these polygons that are being rounded virtually by the subdivision modifier are creating a smaller rounded shape, right? So if I was to double click this edge loop, right click to slide edge slide, right? See, as I move these away, it sharpens that shape up, but it softens this because now these 3 edge loops define a larger area, so the rounding is larger. So that's really what's happening with this on a subdivisional surface, is that you're kind of just tightening this form up. And of course, you could just slide some edges, right? Right-click, edge slide. I could slide these in to make it a little tighter. And remember, your slide edge tool slides along the existing surface. You notice how it's not freely moving everywhere like a view move would? So when you slide, it's actually sliding these edges along the perpendicular edges, whichever direction you're sliding it. So if you're sliding it this way, it's actually trying to constrain its movement along these perpendicular edges. If you were sliding it this way, it would try to constrain it to these ones. And you see how that's really starting to kind of tighten up that corner there now? You can even go in here and put an extra one in here just to kind of tighten that up as well. And that's just loop cut, right? Alt-C. And then you just left-click drag. Probably move these guys in just a little bit more. And of course, we can start to see how this starts to tighten up. Starts to looking like it's properly thickened, right? And that's kind of where we're at with that, right? We're just kind of trying to start to kind of fill in the rest of the parts of the car. So we have kind of our main body built. Start to get to the windows, do some interior stuff and rims. But I think that'll be a great place to stop.